Have you ever had the feeling that someone has been observing you? When you realize you're not as alone as you initially believed, do you get a chill? My name is Gerald, and I still can't sleep at night because of what happened to me on Highway 101 last month. See, I've always believed that the things that you could see coming were the scariest. I was mistaken. What you can't see and discover too late is the true source of fear. So I've been down at Morro Bay for the weekend. You know, one of those spontaneous trips where you just need to get out of the city for a bit. Nothing fancy. Just me, my beat-up Honda Civic, and way too much gas station coffee. The beach was perfect. Exactly what I needed after the week I'd had at work. Tech support gets pretty soul-crushing when you're dealing with Karen, after Karen, who can't figure out why their password 123, isn't working anymore. Anyway, I stayed way longer than I planned. You know how it is. You're watching the sunset, feeling all zen, and then suddenly it's past 10, and you've got a 3-hour drive ahead of you. But I figured, hey, less traffic at night, right? Plus my girlfriend Sarah was working the late shift at the hospital. So it's not like anyone was waiting up for me. The first hour was actually pretty nice. Windows down, some old rock station playing, just me and the empty highway. You get into this zone, you know? Just the yellow lines and the occasional semi-truck passing by. It's almost meditative. But then my phone started acting up. The GPS kept glitching, telling me to make a U-turn every few minutes even though I was going straight on 101. Classic iPhone bullshit. So around midnight, I pulled over onto the shoulder near one of those agriculture inspection stations. You know the ones, all closed up at night with those weird orange lights. I put the car in park, hazards on, and started messing with my phone, trying to get the GPS to cooperate. That's when I noticed the headlights in my rear view mirror. Now, cars pass by all the time on the highway, right? But this one, it slowed down, like really slowed down, and then it just stopped, maybe 50 yards behind me, engine still running. I could hear it idling even over my own car. I looked in my mirror, but all I could see were those two white headlights just sitting there. No movement, no nothing, just waiting. At first, I thought maybe they were having car trouble too. You know, solidarity among stranded drivers and all that. So I waited a minute, figured they'd either pull up and ask for help or get back on the road. But they didn't move. 5 minutes went by, then 10. My phone had finally sorted itself out, but I was starting to get this weird feeling in my stomach, like when you're a kid and you know something's wrong, but you can't put your finger on it. I rolled my window down a crack and listened, just a distant hum of their engine mixing with mine. No radio, no voices, no door slamming, nothing. That's when I decided to get the hell out of there. I put the car in drive, checked my mirrors, and merged back onto the highway. The other car immediately did the same. Not rushing, not aggressive. Just following, keeping that same 50-yard distance like we were in some kind of weird convoy. Okay, I told myself coincidence. We're both heading north. Probably both go to the Bay Area. No big deal. But after 20 minutes of this exact same distance, exact same speed, I started getting paranoid. So I tested it. I sped up to about 75. They matched me, slowed down to 60. They slowed down too. It was like I was pulling them along on an invisible string. The highway was pretty empty, maybe 1 or 2 cars every few minutes. But every time another vehicle appeared, they'd hang back until it passed, then resume their position right behind me, like they didn't want witnesses. My hands were starting to sweat on the steering wheel. I kept looking in the rear view, trying to make out the driver, but their headlights were too bright. All I could see was this dark silhouette behind the wheel, just sitting there, watching me. I decided to try the King City exit. Figured if they followed me off the highway, I'd know for sure something was wrong. Plus, there's a 24-hour McDonald's there, lots of lights, maybe some people around. I put on my turn signal nice and early, real casual-like. Sure enough, their turn signal went on too. My heart started pounding. This wasn't coincidence anymore. I took the exit, went through the drive-thru, ordered a Coke I didn't want, just buying time. The car pulled into the parking lot and just waited, didn't order anything, didn't get out. Just sat there in the shadows by the dumpster, engine running. When I pulled back onto the highway, they were right behind me again. That's when it hit me. They weren't just following my route. They were following me, specifically me. This wasn't random. I tried 3 more exits over the next hour. Gilroy, Morgan Hill, San Jose. Every time, same thing. They'd follow me off, wait while I circle around or stop somewhere, then follow me back on, always keeping that distance. Always just a dark shape in my mirrors. My phone kept buzzing with texts from Sarah asking how the drive was going. I didn't know what to tell her. Hey, babe, I think someone's stalking me on the highway. It sounded insane even in my head. But the worst part, I started noticing things. Little things. Like how they knew exactly when I was going to change lanes before I even put my signal on. How they'd slow down right before I did, like they could read my mind. And the way they positioned themselves. Always in my blind spot when other cars were around, like they didn't want anyone else to see the pattern. Around 2 a.m., somewhere between San Jose and San Francisco, I got desperate. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures of the headlights in my mirror, thinking maybe I could get a license plate or something. That's when they turned their brights on. The sudden glare was blinding. I nearly swerved into the median, squinting and cursing. But in that split second before the light hit my eyes, I saw something that made my blood turn to ice. The car wasn't just following me. It was identical to mine. Same color, same model, same year Honda Civic. Even the same dent in the front bumper from when I'd backed into a pole last summer. I started shaking, like actually trembling, because now I was thinking about all those little things. How they knew when I was going to change lanes, how they predicted my moves. What if it wasn't prediction at all? What if they'd been watching me for a while? What if they knew my habits, my car, my routes? What if this beach trip wasn't as spontaneous as I thought? I started remembering weird stuff from the past few weeks. That feeling of being watched in parking lots. How my car had been moved slightly in my apartment complex. Just a few inches, but enough that I noticed. Those calls where no one answered when I picked up. I made it to my apartment in the Mission around 3 a.m., taking every back street and alley I could think of. By then, I couldn't see the car anymore, but I wasn't taking any chances. I parked in the underground garage and just sat there for 20 minutes, listening. No other engines, no footsteps, nothing. Finally, I made a run for the elevator. Sarah was already asleep when I got in. I stood in the kitchen for an hour, looking out the window at the street below, waiting for those headlights to appear around the corner. They never did. But here's the thing that still messes with me. The next morning, I went to check on my car, make sure everything was okay. And there, tucked under my windshield wiper, was a receipt from the McDonald's in King City, time stamped at 12:47 a.m. I never bought anything at that McDonald's. I went to the drive-thru, sure, but I never got a receipt. Someone else did, though. Someone who was watching me closely enough to know exactly where I'd stopped. Someone who wanted me to know they'd been there too. It's been 3 weeks now. I've changed my routes, my schedule, everything. But sometimes when I'm driving at night and I see headlights in my mirror that stay just a little too close for just a little too long, I wonder, was I ever really alone on that highway? Or are they still out there, keeping that same patient distance, waiting for the right moment to close the gap? And the worst part, I still don't know who they were, or why they chose me. But I have this feeling, this horrible, nagging feeling, that they're not done with me yet. Because you don't go through all that trouble, all that careful stalking and planning, just to give up after one night. Do you? Do you know how it feels to be by yourself in a place that ought to be crowded? Where every sound reverberates a bit too long, and every shadow appears incorrect. Yes, I did experience that sensation for 3 months in a row. And truthfully, the first time I saw those lights, I wished I had given up. Before last year, I was just another broke college student trying to make ends meet. My name is Dan. I had been doing security and cleanup after their summer programs at Lincoln High, which is my former high school, on a part-time basis. Rehearsals for plays, wrestling camps, etc. Simple money, huh? Set the alarm, lock up, and turn off the lights. What might go wrong? I should have known better. I mean, the place always creeped me out even when I was a student there. But when you're making $15 an hour to basically do nothing for 4 hours, you don't ask questions. But there's something about empty schools at night, man. Something fundamentally wrong with all those hallways that should be full of kids. All those classrooms sitting dark and silent. It's like the building itself is holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. And in my case, it was. So picture this. It's July, middle of summer. I've been doing this gig for about 2 weeks, and I had it down to a routine. Show up at 8 p.m., walk through the main building, lock up the gym and the art rooms, check that all the lights are off, set the alarm, go home. Maybe an hour and a half of actual work. Then I'd sit in the security office playing games on my phone until midnight. The building was pretty much empty except for the summer drama program that ran until 7:30. Just a bunch of high school kids doing Shakespeare or whatever. By the time I got there, they were always gone, and the drama teacher, Mrs. Patterson, I think, would leave me a note about which rooms to check. Lincoln High is this old brick building from the 60s, built like a maze. 3 wings spreading out from a central hub, with a gym and auditorium attached. Most of it was getting renovated that summer. The east wing was completely gutted, plastic sheets hanging everywhere, tools and sawdust covering everything. That whole section was supposed to be off limits. The first weird thing happened on a Thursday night in my 3rd week. I'm doing my usual walkthrough, and I'm heading past the east wing when I see it. A light on in one of the classrooms down that hallway. Just one window, glowing yellow against all that darkness. Now, I knew the power was supposed to be cut to that section. The renovation crew had told me that themselves. But there it was, plain as day. Room 237. I think it was. I almost just left it. I mean, my job was to lock up the main building, not go crawling around construction zones. But something about that single light bothered me. Like, what if there was an electrical problem? What if the building caught fire because I didn't check it out? So I grabbed my flashlight and head down that hallway. The smell hit me first. You know, that smell of old school's floor wax, industrial cleaning products, decades of teenage sweat soaked into the walls? But this was different. Heavier. Like the air itself was thick with dust and something else I couldn't place. Something organic. The plastic sheeting rustled as I pushed through it. My footsteps echoed weird in that hallway. The construction had torn up most of the flooring, so I was walking on bare concrete. Every step sounded like a gunshot in the silence. When I got to room 237, the door was propped open. Not unusual. The construction guys left doors open all the time for ventilation, but the light inside wasn't construction lighting. It was a regular classroom fluorescence, humming that familiar buzz you remember from sitting through boring lectures. I stepped inside and my blood went cold. The desks were arranged, not stacked up against the walls like you'd expect in a construction zone, arranged in perfect rows, facing the front of the room, like someone had been teaching a class. But that wasn't the worst part. On the teacher's desk at the front, there was a notebook, open with a pen line beside it, fresh handwriting covering the page, names written in neat, careful script. 23 names. I counted them. Names I'd never heard before, but they sounded old-fashioned, I guess, like something from the 40s or 50s. Margaret Kellison, Robert Thorne, Susan Clark, names like that. My hands were shaking as I picked up the notebook. The ink was still wet. I mean, literally wet. When I touched it, it smeared. Someone had been in this room. Recently, maybe they were still in the building. I called out, "Hello? Security? Is someone in here?" But my voice just echoed back at me from the empty hallways. Nothing. I took a photo of the page with my phone, closed the notebook, and got the hell out of there. Turned off the light, locked the main building, and went home. But I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those names, about the neat handwriting, about how the ink was still wet. The next day, I called the school administration, told them about the light, about someone possibly being in the building. They said they'd look into it, but honestly, I could tell they thought I was making it up. Probably figured I was trying to get overtime or something. Friday night, I almost called in sick, but I needed the money. And besides, what was the worst that could happen? Famous last words, right? So I show up, do my regular routine. This time, I'm being extra careful about checking the east wing. I walk down that hallway, check every room, all dark, all locked. No problems. But when I get to room 237, the light is on again. And this time the door is closed. My heart is absolutely pounding as I reach for the handle. Part of me wants to just walk away, call the cops, let them deal with it. But another part of me, the stupid part, needs to know what's going on. I turn the handle. The door swings open. Same setup as before. Desks in perfect rows, fluorescent lights humming. But the notebook on the teacher's desk is different now. The same names are there, but they're all crossed out, violently. Heavy black ink scratched through each name so hard that it tore through the paper in places. And underneath, in different handwriting, shakier, more desperate, someone had written, "They know I'm here." I'm not ashamed to admit it. I ran, turned off the light, slammed the door, and got out of that building as fast as I could. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 10 minutes, hands shaking, trying to figure out what to do. In the end, I called it in, told the police. I thought someone was breaking into the school. They sent a patrol car, 2 officers who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. We walked through the building together. Main areas, east wing, everywhere. Nothing. Room 237 was dark, door locked. When we opened it, the desks were stacked against the walls just like they should be. No notebook, no signs anyone had been there. The cops were polite about it, but I could see what they were thinking. Another security guard jumping at shadows, probably drinking on the job. But I know what I saw. I should have quit right then. Should have walked into the principal's office Monday morning and handed in my keys. But like I said, I needed the money. And honestly, part of me was curious. Part of me needed to understand what was happening in that room. So I kept working. But I changed my routine. Instead of waiting until the end of my shift to check the east wing, I'd walk by room 237 every hour. Just a quick look to see if the light was on. For 2 weeks, nothing. The room stayed dark. Door stayed locked. I started to think maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. Stress, working nights, too much caffeine. Maybe I just had some kind of breakdown. Then Miguel didn't show up. Miguel was the janitor who covered my shift on Saturdays. Good guy. Been working at the school for 15 years. Never missed a day, never complained. But that Saturday, he just didn't come in. The school called me, asked if I could cover. Double pay. So of course I said yes. But when I got there, Miguel's car was in the parking lot. His keys were sitting on the security desk. No note, no explanation. Just his keys and his time card. Punched in at 8 p.m. the night before. They found his body Sunday morning. Heart attack, the paramedics said. Natural causes. Miguel was 63, overweight, smoked 2 packs a day. Not exactly shocking that his heart gave out, except they found him in room 237. The official report said he must have been checking on a light that was reported malfunctioning, but I never reported any light. And that room was supposed to be locked, power cut off. The weirdest part? They found a notebook clutched in his hand. Same kind of composition book as before, but this one only had one name written in it. Miguel Santos. And underneath, in his own handwriting, I understand now, they were never students. I quit the next day. Didn't even go in person. Just called and told them I was done. They were pretty understanding, considering losing a coworker like that. It shakes you up, but here's the thing that still keeps me up at night. I did some research after Miguel died. Went to the library, looked up old yearbooks, school records. Those names I saw in the notebook that first night, Margaret Kellison, Robert Thorne, Susan Clark, and the others, they were all students at Lincoln High. Back in 1953. They all died in a fire. School Christmas dance, December 15th. Exits were blocked. Old building, no sprinkler system. 23 kids, all between 14 and 17 years old. The fire happened in the East Wing. Same hallway where room 237 is now. But here's what really messes with me. The school board covered it up. Officially, those kids died in a transportation accident on the way home from the dance. Families were paid to keep quiet. Records were sealed. The East Wing was rebuilt, and everyone pretended it never happened. Until now, I think they've been having class in that room for 70 years, waiting for someone to acknowledge them, to remember what really happened. And anyone who sees them, anyone who learns the truth, they don't want them to leave. I tried to tell the police about the connection, about the fire, about the cover-up. They said I was grieving, that losing Miguel had affected my judgment. Post-traumatic stress, they called it. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm just a guy who worked too many night shifts in a creepy old building and let his imagination run wild. But last week, I drove by Lincoln High. Just curious, you know? Wanted to see how the renovation was going. The East Wing was all lit up. Every classroom, every window. Like school was in session. And in room 237, I could see figures moving around. Sitting at desks, facing front of the room. 23 of them, maybe 24 now. That wing is still under construction. Security personnel are still being hired to keep an eye on the building at night. The job posting is back up online with the same hours and pay. Perhaps don't apply if you're considering it. Look for something else. Flip burgers, work at a gas station, or do anything else. Because not all lessons are meant to be learned. Additionally, there are some schools that don't actually let you graduate. Have you ever had the feeling that something is off, but your brain hasn't yet figured it out? Like when you hear footsteps that stop, when you stop while you're out on your own at night. I still check my hair twice a night, even though what I'm about to tell you happened 3 months ago. I'm Hector, a 28-year-old IT professional at a Chicago credit union. Quite a typical life, isn't it? Yes, that's what I also believed until one night altered my entire perception of safety. It was late August, probably around 11:30 p.m. on a Saturday. My buddy Marcus had thrown this barbecue out in the suburbs. You know, one of those summers almost over type deals. Good food, cold beer, catching up with people I hadn't seen since college. The kind of night where you lose track of time. By the time I decided to head home, most people had already left. I was feeling good, not drunk, just relaxed, you know? The kind of tired you get after laughing for hours. I hugged Marcus goodbye, grabbed my keys in a bowl by his front door, and headed out to my Honda. The drive back to the city should have been simple. Take Route 47 south for about 40 minutes, then merge onto I-290. I'd done it a dozen times before, but about 20 minutes in, I noticed my gas gauge sitting just above empty. Now, normally I would have just risked it. My car's got decent mileage, and I probably had enough to make it home. But something about driving on fumes through those dark country roads at midnight didn't sit right with me. So when I saw the lights of a gas station up ahead, I figured I'd play it safe. The place was one of those old school convenience stores. You know the type? Faded yellow sign that just said gas food drinks in block letters, with maybe half the bulbs still working. The kind of place that looks like it hasn't changed since the 90s. There were only two other cars in the lot. A beat-up pickup truck and some sedan that had seen better days. I pulled up to pump number 3 and got out. The air was thick and humid, with that late summer smell of hot asphalt and something slightly sour I couldn't place. The fluorescent lights above the pumps were buzzing and flickering, casting these weird shadows that kept shifting. While my tank filled, I looked around. The area was pretty isolated. Just a gas station, then nothing but cornfields and darkness in every direction. The highway was far enough away that I could barely see the occasional headlight cutting through the night. When the pump clicked off, I decided to grab a bottle of water for the rest of the drive. The bell above the door made this sharp ding as I walked in, and immediately I felt watched. The cashier was this guy, probably in his 50s, thin build, wearing a Cubs t-shirt that had definitely seen better days. The moment I stepped inside, his eyes locked onto me. Not like he was checking me out or anything weird like that. It was more like recognition, like he knew something I didn't. I nodded at him, gave him that polite, "How's it going?" smile you give strangers, and headed to the drink cooler. The store was small, just 3 aisles of the usual convenience store stuff. Chips, candy, energy drinks, some random car supplies. Typical fluorescent lighting that made everything look slightly green and sickly. But the whole time I'm browsing, I can feel his eyes on me. Not moving, not blinking much, just staring. I grabbed a bottle of Dasani and turned toward the counter, and he was still looking at me with this expression I couldn't read. Concern, maybe? Or warning. Just this. I said, placing the water on the counter. $2.50, he said quietly. His voice was raspy, like he'd been smoking for decades. I handed him $3, and as he made change, he leaned forward slightly. "You driving alone tonight?" he asked. I paused. Weird question, right? Yeah, just heading back to Chicago. He nodded slowly, his eyes flicking toward the front windows, then back to me. "Been quiet tonight. Too quiet." I laughed nervously. "Well, that's probably good for business, right? Nice and peaceful." He didn't laugh back. Instead, he handed me my change and said, "Some nights, quiet ain't peaceful." I had no idea what to say to that, so I just took my water and headed for the door. But as I reached for the handle, he called out, "Hey!" I turned back. "Take your time in here if you need to. No rush." Okay, now I was officially weirded out. I pushed through the door and stepped back into the humid night air. The bell dinged behind me, and I started walking toward my car, keys already in my hand. That's when I saw them. Two guys, standing maybe 10 feet from my Honda, both wearing dark clothes, jeans, hoodies despite the heat. One was tall and lean, the other shorter but stockier. They weren't looking at me directly, but they were clearly aware I was there. Both had their phones out, like they were texting or checking something, but something about their posture felt wrong. You know when people are genuinely absorbed in their phones versus when they're pretending? These guys were pretending. I slowed down, trying to figure out what to do. My car was right there, but I'd have to walk past him to get to it. The tall one glanced up from his phone, made eye contact with me for just a second, then looked back down. But in that brief moment, I saw something that made my stomach drop. He smiled, not a friendly smile, not even a polite, stranger smile. It was the kind of smile you see in movies right before something terrible happens. The shorter guy shifted his weight, and I caught a glimpse of something tucked into his waistband. Could have been anything, a phone, a wallet, but my brain immediately went to darker possibilities. I turned around and went back into the store. The bell dinged again, and the cashier looked up, not surprised at all to see me return. "Couldn't find your keys?" he asked calmly. "No, there are some guys out there, by my car." He nodded, like this confirmed something he already knew. "Yeah, they pulled up about 5 minutes after you did. Been waiting. The word hit me like ice water. Waiting for what? Instead of answering, he reached under the counter and pulled out a bottle of water, a different brand than what I just bought. He set it on the counter between us. "Leave through the back," he said quietly. "Now." "What?" "I don't understand." "There's a door behind the beer cooler. Leads to a loading dock. Your car's not worth your life, kid." My hands were shaking now. "Should I call the police?" He shook his head. "Cell tower's been down for 2 hours. Landline's been cut since this morning." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "This isn't the first time." "What do you mean, not the first time?" The cashier glanced toward the front windows, then motioned for me to follow him deeper into the store. We walked past the snack aisles to the back, where he pointed to a door I hadn't noticed before, partially hidden behind a beer display. 3 weeks ago, a young woman, maybe your age, stopped for gas around midnight. Same 2 guys showed up. She was smart, came back inside when she saw them. He paused, running his hand through his graying hair. She left through that door. Found her car stripped clean the next morning, but she was safe. How do you know it was the same guys? Because I've been working this shift for 12 years, and I know trouble when I see it. They've been hitting isolated stops along this stretch of highway for months. Gas stations, rest stops, anywhere people might be alone and vulnerable. I felt sick. What do they want? Cars, mostly. Sometimes more, depending on who they're targeting. He looked me up and down. "Young guy, nice clothes, decent car?" "Yeah, you're exactly their type." The fluorescent lights seemed to flicker more intensely, and I could hear the low hum of the refrigerators. But underneath that, something else. Footsteps on gravel, moving around the building. They're checking the perimeter. The cashier said matter-of-factly, "They know you came back inside. They're figuring out their next move." "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Okay," so I go out the back. "Then what? How do I get home?" The cashier walked over the door and unlocked it with a key from his pocket. Loading dock drops down to a service road. Follow it east for about half a mile. You'll hit Route 23. There's a truck stop there that's open all night. Well lit, lots of people. You can call someone to pick you up. "What about my car?" "What about your life?" He shot back. "Look, kid, I don't know what these guys are planning, but I know it's nothing good. And I know that the last person who tried to tough it out." He trailed off. "What happened to them?" "Found him 2 days later, in a ditch about 10 miles from here. Wallet gone, car gone, but that's not what killed him." I didn't want to ask, but I had to. "What did?" The cashier looked me dead in the eye. "Blunt force trauma. They beat him to death with something heavy. Police never found the weapon." My mouth went dry. Through the front windows, I could see shadows moving. The 2 men weren't by my car anymore. They were closer to the building now. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. "Because I got a son about your age," he said simply. "And because someone needs to survive this to tell people what's happening out here." The cashier, I never did get his name, opened the back door slowly. The loading dock was small, just a concrete platform with a short drop to the service road he'd mentioned. The area was dark, lit only by a single security light that cast long shadows. "Move fast, but stay quiet," he whispered. "Don't look back. Don't hesitate. Just get to that truck stop and call for help." I nodded, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. "Wait," I said. "What about you? Won't they come inside looking for me?" He smiled grimly. "I'll tell them you left the front while I was in the bathroom. They'll waste time looking for you on the highway." He paused. "I've got a shotgun under the counter, if they get aggressive about it." Before I could thank him or ask any more questions, he gave me a gentle push toward the door. "Go. Now." I stepped out onto the loading dock, and immediately the night felt different. Cooler, but more menacing. Every shadow could have been hiding someone. Every sound, and there were a lot of them, insects and wind and distant traffic, seemed amplified. I jumped down from the platform and started walking quickly along the service road. Try to stay in the shadows, but still be able to see where I was going. Behind me, the gas station looked small and vulnerable. its fluorescent lights creating a bubble of harsh illumination in the darkness. After what felt like forever but was probably only 10 minutes, I saw the truck stop ahead. Just like the cashier had said, bright lights, several big rigs parked in the lot, people moving around. Safety. I called my roommate Jake from the truck stop, and he drove out to get me. Took him almost an hour. While I waited, I sat in the restaurant area, drinking coffee and trying to process what had just happened. The next morning, I called the police and told them everything. They were polite, but not particularly surprised. Apparently, there had been a string of incidents along that stretch of highway. Carjackings, robberies, worse things. But the perpetrators were always gone by the time anyone investigated. When I asked about my car, they said they'd look into it. 2 days later, they called to tell me it had been found about 15 miles from the gas station. Completely stripped. Engine, wheels, electronics, everything valuable was gone. The weird part? My registration and insurance papers were neatly folded and left on the dashboard, like someone wanted me to be able to identify it. I never went back to that gas station. Hell, I don't drive that route anymore at all. But sometimes, late at night when I'm having trouble sleeping, I think about that cashier. I wonder if he's still there, still helping people escape to the back door. I wonder how many others he's saved. And I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't listened to that gut feeling telling me something was wrong. If I just walked to my car like nothing was happening. I guess I'll never know. And honestly, I'm okay with that. I'm Daniel, and I'm a pretty logical guy. I work data entry at a temp agency downtown. Nothing glamorous, but it pays the bills. I'm not the type to believe in ghost stories or urban legends. But what happened to me last August? It still keeps me up at night. And the worst part? I have no idea what really happened that night, or if it was even real at all. So this was back when I was pulling these brutal late shifts at the office. The temp agency had landed this massive contract digitizing old insurance records, and they needed bodies in chairs from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. The pay was decent enough that I couldn't say no, even though it meant catching the last bus home every night. The 47 line was my lifeline. It ran from downtown all the way out to Millfield, where I rent this crappy studio apartment above a laundromat. The last bus was supposed to leave at 2:15 a.m. sharp, and I'd usually make it with maybe 30 seconds to spare. Still smelling like the office coffee that had been sitting on the burner for 8 hours. I'd been doing this routine for about 6 weeks when the night in question happened. It was a Tuesday in late August, one of those humid summer nights where the air feels thick enough to chew. I remember because I'd been counting down the days until the project ended and I could go back to normal human hours. I clocked out at exactly 2:05 a.m. Same as always. The office building was one of those generic glass towers that look identical to 50 other buildings downtown. At night, with most of the floors dark, it felt like being inside a giant tombstone. My footsteps echoed in the marble lobby as I headed for the exit. The security guard, this older guy named Martinez, gave me his usual nod. "Have a good one, Daniel. See you tomorrow." "You too, man," I said, pushing through the revolving door into the sticky night air. The bus stop was just half a block away, across from a 24-hour parking garage. There was a single flickering streetlight that cast these weird dancing shadows on the cracked sidewalk. I could already see the digital display. Next bus, 47 line, 3 minutes. That should have been my first clue that something was wrong. The display usually said the exact time, 2:15 a.m. But I was tired, you know? When you're running on 4 hours of sleep and gas station energy drinks, your brain doesn't process details like it should. The bus pulled up right on schedule. That familiar wheeze of hydraulic brakes and the smell of diesel exhaust mixing with the summer heat. The doors opened with their mechanical sigh, and I climbed the 3 rubber-matted steps. The driver didn't look at me when I tapped my card. He had his cap pulled low, and something about his posture seemed, I don't know, wrong somehow. slumped forward like he was exhausted or maybe sick. But bus drivers work crazy hours too, so I didn't think much of it. The bus was mostly empty, which was normal for that time of night. Just me and one other passenger, a guy in a dark hoodie sitting all the way in the back. I took my usual seat about halfway down, on the right side, so I could see my stop coming up. As we pulled away from downtown, I settled in for the 40-minute ride. The bus route wound through some pretty sketchy neighborhoods before hitting the suburbs where I lived. Lots of boarded-up storefronts, abandoned lots, and buildings covered in graffiti that looked more like warnings and art. I pulled out my phone to kill time, maybe scroll through some mindless social media posts. That's when I noticed my battery was almost dead, even though I'd charged it at work. Weird, but whatever. Phone batteries die. We hit the first stop about 10 minutes into the ride. Nobody got on, nobody got off. The doors opened. Stayed open for maybe 30 seconds, then closed. Standard procedure. But as we pulled away, I caught movement in my peripheral vision. The guy in the hoodie had moved. He was no longer in the very back. Now he was maybe 3 or 4 rows closer to the front, closer to me. I told myself he'd probably just moved to a more comfortable seat. People do that on empty buses all the time. But something about the way he'd moved, it was so quiet. I hadn't heard any footsteps, any rustling of clothing, nothing. The next stop was about 7 minutes later. Again, nobody waiting, nobody getting off. Doors open, pause, doors close. But this time, I was watching the reflection of the window. The hooded figure had moved again, another 3 or 4 rows forward. My skin started to prickle. This wasn't normal passenger behavior. If you want to sit closer to the front, you just move when you get on. You don't creep forward seat by seat at every stop. I tried to get a better look at the guy, but every time I turned around, his face was hidden in the shadow of his hood. All I could make out was that he was wearing dark clothes. The hoodie, dark jeans, dark sneakers. Average build, nothing distinctive. By the 5th stop, he was only about 6 rows behind me, close enough that I could hear his breathing, this slow, steady rhythm that seemed too loud in the quiet bus. The driver still hadn't said a word, hadn't made any of the usual announcements about upcoming stops. I was starting to feel genuinely freaked out. My hands were getting sweaty, and I kept checking the time on the dim display at the front of the bus. Still 20 minutes to my stop. 6th stop. Doors open. Nobody there. Doors close. In the window reflection, I watched him move again. 4 rows behind me now. My heart was starting to pound. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't normal. I considered getting off early, maybe at the shopping center near Oakwood. But it was 2:30 in the morning. Everything would be closed, and I'd be stranded in an empty parking lot with this guy. At least on the bus, there was a driver. Even if he seemed weird, he was still another person. 7th stop, 3 rows behind me. I could smell him now. Not body odor exactly, but something musty and stale, like clothes that have been left damp too long. And that breathing, steady and deliberate, like he was doing it on purpose to mess with me. I pulled out my phone to call someone, anyone, but the screen was black, completely dead. I pressed the power button, held it down, nothing. 8th stop, 2 rows behind me. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, gripping the metal pole beside my seat, and turned around to face him directly. "Hey man, what's your deal?" I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. He didn't respond, didn't even lift his head. But I could see his hands now, resting on his knees. They were pale, almost gray in the dim bus lighting, and his fingernails were long, longer than they should be. "I'm talking to you," I said, louder this time. Still nothing, but his hands twitched just slightly. I looked toward the front of the bus. "Driver, hey driver." The driver didn't respond either, didn't even turn his head. It was like he couldn't hear me at all. 9th stop, when the doors closed, the hooded man was in the seat directly behind me. I could feel the heat from his body, hear every breath, smelled that musty odor so strongly it made my stomach turn. My hands were shaking as I gripped the seat in front of me. "Please," I whispered, not sure if I was talking to the man, the driver, or God. "Just leave me alone." That's when I heard it. A sound I'll never forget as long as I live. He whispered my name. "Daniel." I've never moved so fast in my life. I lunged forward, slapping the stop request button so hard it probably left a dent. The bus slowed, pulled over to the curb. "This is my stop," I announced loudly, hoping the driver would at least acknowledge that I was getting off. He didn't. The doors opened, and I practically threw myself down the steps onto the sidewalk. I was still about 6 blocks from home, but I didn't care. I needed off that bus. I turned to watch it pull away, to see if the hooded man would get off too. Through the windows, I could see him standing in the aisle, and for the first time, I got a glimpse of his face. It wasn't a face at all, just shadow under that hood, deeper and darker than any shadow should be. But then the bus turned the corner, and he was gone. I started walking home, fast. The streets were completely empty. No cars, no other pedestrians, no lights in any windows. Just me and the occasional street light casting weak pools of yellow light on the cracked sidewalk. I'd gone maybe 2 blocks when I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't want to look. Didn't want to confirm what I already knew. But I had to. He was there, about half a block behind me, walking at the exact same pace. Still in that dark hoodie, still keeping his face hidden. I walked faster. So, did he? I slowed down, pretending to check my phone. He slowed down too. This was insane. How had he gotten off the bus? I'd been watching when it pulled away. I picked up the pace again, my sneakers slapping against the concrete. The footsteps behind me matched my rhythm perfectly. When I stepped on a crack, I heard him step on it too. When I stepped over a discarded soda can, I heard the can rattle again a few seconds later. By the time I reached my street, I was practically jogging. My apartment building was just ahead. That beautiful, normal, boring brick building with a laundromat on the ground floor and my crappy studio on the second. I broke into a run for the last block. I fumbled with my keys at the front door, hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the lock. Behind me, I could hear those footsteps getting closer, steady, unhurried, like he had all the time in the world. The lock finally clicked open. I threw myself inside, slammed the door behind me, and immediately threw the deadbolt. Then I pressed my back against the door and tried to catch my breath. After a few minutes, I worked up the courage to look out the front window. The street was completely empty. No hooded figure, no movement at all. Just the usual row of parked cars and the dim glow of streetlights. I laughed, actually laughed out loud. I felt like an idiot. Some random guy on the bus had moved seats a few times, and I'd worked myself into a complete panic attack. Maybe he was just trying to get closer to the front, so he wouldn't miss his stop. Maybe he'd whispered someone else's name, or I'd imagined it entirely. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, unlocked the door, and collapsed onto my couch. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and I had to be back at work in 16 hours. I decided to check the bus schedule online. Maybe see if there were any earlier routes I could catch, so I wouldn't have to take that creepy last bus again. That's when I found it. The 47-line summer schedule was posted right there on the Transit Authority's website. But according to the official schedule, the last bus had been canceled all summer due to driver shortages. The last scheduled bus was at 11:45 p.m. There was no 2:15 a.m. bus. There hadn't been one since May. I sat there staring at the screen, trying to process what I was reading. I'd been taking that bus for 6 weeks, every single night. How was that possible if it didn't exist? I checked my wallet. My bus card was there, and according to the online account, I'd been charged for rides every night. The transactions were all there, time-stamped 2:15 a.m., Route 47. But the Route 47 didn't run at 2:15 a.m. I called the Transit Authority the next morning, spoke to 3 different people, got transferred around. Finally reached a supervisor. "Sir, I'm showing here that the 47 line hasn't run past midnight since May 15th due to budget cuts," she said. "There's definitely no 2:15 a.m. service." "But I've been taking it every night," I insisted. "I have the charges on my card." "That's very strange," she admitted. "Let me pull up your account." A long pause. "Mr. Daniel, I'm not seeing any charges for nighttime 47 line service. Your last recorded ride was 3 weeks ago at 6:30 p.m. But I was looking at my account online right then. The charges were right there, every single night. She couldn't see them. I quit the temp job that day. Told him it was a family emergency. Didn't even work out my notice. I couldn't face getting on another bus, especially not at night. But here's the thing that still messes with me. I found a new job with normal hours, and I drive to work now. But sometimes, late at night, I'll be driving home, and I'll see a bus. Route 47, according to the destination sign. And there's always just one passenger visible in the back, wearing a dark hoodie. I've never stopped to check if it's real. The transit authorities still insist there's no late-night 47 service. My bus card account shows no record of those rides. But I know what I experienced. I know I rode that bus for 6 weeks. And I know someone or something was riding it with me. The question that keeps me awake isn't whether it was real or not. The question is, if that bus doesn't exist, and that man wasn't real, then where was I really going every night at 2:15 a.m.? And who was I really following home? My name's Jack, and what I'm about to tell you happened 5 years ago, right before I left for college. I was staying with my childhood friend Marcus in this tiny town called Millbrook. Population, maybe 3,000 on a good day. I thought it'd be a nice, quiet summer before everything changed. Small town, friendly neighbors, nothing ever happens there, right? I was so wrong. So Marcus lived in this old neighborhood where all the houses were built in like the 60s. You know, the type, single-story ranch homes with big backyards and chain-link fences. His house was at the end of a dead-end street. And right next door was this place that always gave me the creeps, even as a kid. The house itself looked normal enough. White siding, green shutters, well-maintained lawn. But it was the backyard that bothered me. There was a shed back there, maybe 10 by 12 feet, painted this weird shade of brown that didn't match anything else. And it always, and I mean always, had this heavy-duty padlock on it. Not your typical master lock you'd get at Home Depot. This thing was industrial, the kind you'd see on storage units or construction sites. The weird part was the shed looked abandoned. The paint was peeling. There were rust stains running down the sides, and weeds had grown up around the foundation, so high they almost reached the windows. But that lock was always shiny and new. Marcus and I used to joke about it when we were kids. "Bet old Mr. Henley's got bodies in there," Marcus would say, laughing. Mr. Henley was a neighbor, this quiet guy in his 60s, always wore the same faded blue work shirt and jeans. He'd wave if he saw you, but he never really talked to anyone, just went to work, came home, tended his garden, seemed harmless enough. But that shed, man, that shed was always locked. I'd been staying with Marcus for about 2 weeks when things started getting weird. It was mid-July, one of those sticky, humid nights where the air just sits on your skin like a wet blanket. We'd been up playing video games until around 2 a.m. when we heard it. We both stopped talking, controllers frozen in our hands. It was coming from next door, from the direction of the shed. Probably just a raccoon or something, Marcus whispered, but his voice had that tight quality it gets when he's trying to convince himself more than me. This wasn't a raccoon. This was rhythmic, deliberate, like someone was hitting something from the inside, or trying to get out. We crept over to Marcus's bedroom window, which had a perfect view of the Henleys' backyard. The shed was maybe 50 feet away, and in the dim glow of the streetlight, we could just make out its silhouette. Dark, Silent now. Should we call someone? I asked. Marcus shook his head. And say what? We heard thumping. Could be anything. But we both knew it wasn't anything. We stayed at that window for another hour, waiting, listening. Nothing. Just the usual night sounds. Crickets, a distant car, the hum of air conditioners. The next morning, Marcus decided to be neighborly. He walked over while Mr. Henley was watering his tomatoes and mentioned, casual-like, that we'd heard some noises coming from the backyard. I watched from the kitchen window as they talked. Mr. Henley just smiled, this weird, tight smile that didn't reach his eyes, and said something that made Marcus nod and back away. When Marcus came inside, his face was pale. What did he say? I asked. He said old houses make old noises. Marcus grabbed a Coke from the fridge, his hands shaking slightly. But Jack, when he smiled, his teeth were stained, like really stained, and not from coffee. That night, we heard it again, and the night after that, always around 2 a.m., always the same pattern, silence, then thumping, then silence again. It was driving us crazy. Neither of us was sleeping well. We started taking turns keeping watch, but we never saw anything. Just that damn shed, sitting there in the darkness with its shiny padlock catching the streetlight. On the fourth night, I couldn't take it anymore. We have to do something. I told Marcus, this is insane. Like what? Break into the guy's shed? That's trespassing, Jack. Something's wrong over there. What if someone's hurt? What if they need help? Marcus stared at me for a long moment. What if they don't? That should have been my cue to drop it. But I was 18 and stupid and convinced I was some kind of hero. So when Marcus fell asleep around 1:30, I snuck out. The night air was thick and still, like the whole world was holding its breath. I slipped through a gap in the fence separating the 2 yards and crept toward the shed. Up close, it looked even worse. The wood was rotting in places, and there was this smell, sweet and sour at the same time, like garbage left in the sun. I pressed my ear against the wall and waited. 2:07 a.m. The sound was right there, maybe 6 inches from my head. I jumped back so fast I nearly fell over. Whatever was inside, it was real, and it was trying to get out. I pulled out my phone and started recording, my hands shaking so bad I could barely hold it steady. The thumping continued for maybe 10 minutes, then stopped. I waited another 20 minutes, but nothing, just that awful smell getting stronger. Back in Marcus's room, I showed him the recording. Even through my phone's crappy speaker, you could hear it clearly, that desperate, rhythmic pounding. We have to call the police, I said. With what? A recording of mysterious thumping? They'll think we're pranking them. Then we wait, we watch, and when we see something, we call. Marcus didn't like it, but he agreed. The next night, we positioned ourselves by his bedroom window with a pair of binoculars Marcus had stolen from his dad's hunting gear. We were ready. 2:05 a.m., right on schedule. I had the binoculars focused on the shed when I saw it, just a flicker, but there was definitely light coming from inside, not electric light. This was orange flickering, like a candle or a flame. There's someone in there, I whispered to Marcus. I can see light. Marcus grabbed the binoculars from me. After a moment, he went completely still. Jack, he said, his voice barely audible. The padlock. I looked, even from 50 feet away, even in the dim light. I could see it clearly. The padlock was open, hanging there on the latch. But open? How is that possible? I asked. We would have seen someone go in. Maybe they were already inside, Marcus said. We watched for another hour. The light flickered on and off. The thumping came and went, but we never saw anyone enter or leave the shed. When morning came, the padlock was closed again. That afternoon, while Mr. Henley was at work, we decided to investigate. I know, trespassing, breaking and entering, all of that, but we had to know. The fence was easy to climb, and the backyard was empty except for some garden tools and a rusty wheelbarrow. We approached the shed slowly, both of us jumping at every little sound. The smell was stronger in daylight, that same sweet sour stench, but now with an undertone of something else, something metallic. I tried the padlock, but it was secure, solid. But as we walked around the shed, checking for other ways in, Marcus grabbed my arm. "Jack, look." There was a small window on the side of the shed, about head height. The glass was grimy and covered with years of dirt, but we could just make out the interior. It was dark inside, but not empty. There were shapes, large, bulky shapes covered with what looked like tarps or blankets. And along one wall, tools. Lots of tools, hanging from hooks. "Gardening stuff," Marcus said, but his voice was uncertain. I wiped the window with my shirt, tried to get a better look. That's when I saw it. In the far corner of the shed, a chair, a simple wooden chair, sitting by itself in the middle of the floor. There were ropes on the chair. "We need to go," Marcus said. "Now." But I couldn't move. I stared at that chair, at those ropes, and felt something cold settle in my stomach. Because now I understood what the thumping was. Someone wasn't trying to get out. Someone was tied to that chair, trying to get free. Marcus. I started to say, but he was already pulling me away from the window. "We're calling the police. Right now." We climbed back over the fence and ran inside. Marcus dialed 911 while I paced around his living room, my mind racing. What if we were wrong? What if it really was just gardening equipment? What if Mr. Henley was just a harmless old man with a hobby? But then I remembered the chair, the ropes, the smell. The police arrived about 20 minutes later. 2 officers in a patrol car. We told them everything. The nightly sounds, the flickering light, what we'd seen through the window. One of the cops, a middle-aged guy with a gray mustache, seemed skeptical. The other, a younger woman, listened carefully and took notes. "We'll talk to Mr. Henley when he gets home," the older cop said. "But boys, you need to stay out of other people's property. What you did was trespassing. But what if someone's being hurt?" I asked. "Then we'll handle it. That's our job." They left, and Marcus and I spent the rest of the day anxiously waiting. Mr. Henley came home around 6 p.m., and about an hour later, the police showed up again. We watched from the kitchen window as they talked to him in his driveway. Mr. Henley was smiling, gesturing toward the shed, acting completely normal. After about 10 minutes, all 3 of them walked to the backyard. Mr. Henley produced a key, unlocked the padlock, and opened the shed door wide. Even from inside the house, we could see the officers looking around inside. They were in there for maybe 5 minutes. When they came out, they were all shaking hands. Mr. Henley closed the shed, locked it again, and the police left. The older cop knocked on Marcus's door a few minutes later. "Boys," he said, "we checked the shed. It's full of gardening equipment and some old furniture. Mr. Henley's been using it for storage since his wife died. Nothing suspicious. But the chair dash," I started. "There's an old rocking chair in there, yes. Belonged to his wife. And some rope he uses for securing tarps." The cop's expression softened slightly. "Look, I get it. You heard some noises. Your imagination ran wild. It happens. But Mr. Henley's a good man who's been through a lot. Cut him some slack, okay?" After he left, Marcus and I sat in stunned silence. Maybe we were wrong. Marcus said finally, "Maybe it really is just storage." I wanted to believe that. I really did. But something still felt off. Why were the sounds always at the same time? Why did we see light inside? And that smell? That night, we didn't hear anything. No thumping, no sounds at all from the shed. It was completely quiet. "See," Marcus said as we got ready for bed. "Just gardening equipment." But I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd missed something, that there was more to this than what the police had seen. I was right. The next morning, I woke up early, around 6 a.m., and decided to go for a jog. It was one of those perfect summer mornings, cool and quiet, with that golden light that makes everything look peaceful. I was stretching in Marcus's driveway when I heard the sound of a car door slamming. I looked over and saw Mr. Henley loading something into the back of his pickup truck. Something large and bulky, wrapped in a blue tarp. He saw me watching and waved, that same tight smile on his face. "Spring cleaning," he called out cheerfully. "Getting rid of some old junk." I waved back, but my stomach was churning, because even from 30 feet away, I could smell that sweet, sour stench again. Stronger now, Mr. Henley drove away, and I stood there in the driveway, my heart pounding. I told myself it was nothing, old furniture, like he said, but I couldn't stop thinking about that chair, those ropes. That afternoon, when Mr. Henley was at work, I did something stupid. I climbed the fence again and went to the shed window. It took me a few minutes to clean off enough grime to see inside clearly, and when I did, I understood why the police hadn't found anything suspicious. The shed was different. The shapes I'd seen before were gone. The chair was gone. Even some of the tools were missing. Mr. Henley had cleaned it out, made it look normal, made it look innocent, but he'd missed something. There, in the corner where the chair had been, was a dark stain on the wooden floor, and scratched into the wall, so faint I almost missed it, were marks, tally marks, like someone had been keeping count of days, or victims. I took pictures with my phone and climbed back over the fence. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the camera steady. That night, for the first time in a week, the shed was completely silent, but I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that stain, those tally marks, and I thought about that blue tarp in Mr. Henley's truck and where he might have taken it. The next morning, I made a decision that probably saved my life. I called the police again, not the local cops. They'd already made up their minds about Mr. Henley. I called the state police and told them I had evidence of a possible crime. When they asked what kind of evidence, I sent them the pictures. 2 hours later, 3 state police cars pulled up in front of the Henley house. This time, they didn't just look in the shed. They brought in a forensics team. They took samples of that stain I'd photographed. They brought in dogs. And they found things the local cops had missed or chosen not to see. That stain? It was blood. Human blood. And it wasn't the only one. The dogs found traces of human remains buried under the shed's foundation, not recent remains. Old ones. The tally marks I'd seen weren't counting days. They were counting victims. It turned out Mr. Henley had been using that shed for years. The police found evidence linking him to at least 7 missing persons cases dating back over a decade. Drifters, mostly. People who wouldn't be missed right away. He'd lure them in somehow, offer them work, a place to stay, whatever, then bring them to the shed, the chair, the ropes. That's where he'd keep them while he decided what to do with them. The thumping we'd heard? That was his latest victim. A homeless man named Eddie who disappeared 3 days before we started hearing the sounds. By the time we called the police the first time, Eddie was probably already dead. That blue tarp I saw Mr. Henley loading into his truck, that was Eddie being taken to whatever dumping ground Mr. Henley used for disposal. They arrested Mr. Henley at his workplace. The news said he confessed to everything. Seemed almost relieved to finally tell someone about it. During the trial, the details that came out were horrific. Mr. Henley had started killing after his wife died, 5 years earlier. Said it made him feel powerful, in control. The shed had soundproof insulation he'd installed himself. That's why no one had ever heard anything before, except us, on those nights when something had gone wrong with his usual routine. The night we first heard the thumping, Eddie had managed to partially free himself in the chair and was trying to break down the door. Mr. Henley was at work. He usually killed them during the day, when he could control the situation. But Eddie was stronger than the others, more desperate. If we hadn't called the police when we did, if we hadn't kept pushing even when the local cops brushed us off, Mr. Henley would have found another victim, and another, and another. But here's the thing that still keeps me awake at night. That first night, the police checked the shed, when they said they found nothing but gardening equipment. Mr. Henley had Eddie's body in there with him when he opened that door, hidden under a tarp, right there in plain sight. The local cops saw what they expected to see, a grieving widower's storage shed, and missed what was really there, a killer and his victim. Eddie had been alive for at least 2 of those nights we heard the thumping, alive, and tried to escape while we lay in bed 50 feet away, doing nothing. I moved away for college a week after Mr. Henley's arrest. Marcus and I don't talk much anymore. I think we both carried too much guilt about what we could have done differently, how we could have saved Eddie if we'd acted sooner. But sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I think about all those other victims. 7 people who died in that shed, alone and terrified, while their neighbors went about their normal lives just yards away. And I wonder how many other sheds there are out there. How many other Mr. Henleys, hiding in plain sight behind perfectly normal facades. How many other sounds in the night that people choose to ignore, because it's easy to believe that old houses just make old noises. The thing is, they don't. Houses don't make those kinds of sounds. People do. And somewhere right now, someone is making them again. I should have listened to that feeling 3 months ago. Instead, I'm sitting here at 2 a.m. writing this down because I can't sleep. Because every time I close my eyes, I hear it again. That sound. Someone try my door handle. Over and over. Like they're testing to see if I'm still awake. My name's Finn, and I used to think the worst thing about road trips was gas prices and rest stop bathrooms. I was wrong. Dead wrong. So here's the thing. I'm a freelance graphic designer, which means I spend most of my life glued to a computer screen in my cramped Chicago apartment. But my sister Emma got married last month up in Mendocino, right on the California coast. Beautiful wedding, open bar, the whole 9 yards. I stayed an extra week just to decompress, you know? Walked on the beach, ate overpriced seafood, pretended I was the kind of person who could afford oceanfront living. But all good things, right? I had to drive back eventually. It's about a 2,000-mile trek from Mendocino to Chicago, and I'm not exactly flush with cash. So flying was an option. I figured I'd make it a leisurely 3-day drive. See some of the country, maybe find some inspiration for work along the way. The first 2 days went fine. Nothing exciting, just miles of highway, fast food, and gas stations. But by day 3, somewhere in the middle of Nebraska, I was getting antsy. I'd been driving for about 10 hours straight, and it was getting dark. You know how it is out there in the middle of nowhere. 1 second the sun's setting all pretty and orange, and the next second it's pitch black and you can't see shit beyond your headlights. That's when I saw it. This old roadside motel called the Restwell Inn. And I mean old. Like, probably built in the 1960s and hadn't been updated since. The neon sign was flickering. RESD, pause, WELL, pause, INN. The kind of place you drive past and think, who the hell stays there? Well, apparently, desperate people like me. Look, I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I just keep driving to the next town? Find a Holiday Inn or something with decent reviews on Google. Here's the thing, though. My phone was at about 5% battery. My car charger had died somewhere outside Denver, and I hadn't seen another motel sign for the last 60 miles. Plus, I was so tired my eyes were doing that thing where you blink, and for a split second you forget where you are. So I pulled into the cracked asphalt parking lot. There were only 3 other cars there. An old pickup truck with primer spots, a beat-up sedan, and what looked like a conversion van with curtains in the windows. The office was this tiny building with paneling and a buzzing fluorescent light that made everything look sickly green. The clerk was this older guy, maybe 60, with thick glasses and a cardigan that had seen better decades. Nice enough, though, A little too friendly, maybe, but I chalked that up to small-town hospitality. He handed me this actual physical key. Not a key card, but an honest-to-God metal key with plastic diamond keychain that said Room 7 in faded letters. "First time staying with us?" he asked, and his smile was just a little too wide. "Yeah, just passing through," I said. "Well, you picked a good night for it. Real quiet around here. You'll sleep like the dead." While he was processing my credit card on this ancient machine that sounded like a dot matrix printer, I noticed this old leather-bound book sitting on the counter. It was thick, maybe 200 pages, with guest registry embossed on the cover in gold letters that had mostly worn away. "What's that?" I asked. "Oh, that's our guest book. Been using the same one for, must be 15 years now. Folks like to sign in, leave a little message. You're welcome to take a look while I get this sorted." So I did. I mean, why not? I was bored, and there's something oddly fascinating about reading what strangers write in guest books. Most of it was exactly what you'd expect. "Thanks for a comfortable stay, and clean rooms friendly service, and great place to rest on a long journey." But as I flipped through the pages, I started noticing something weird. The handwriting. Every few pages, there'd be an entry in the same distinctive handwriting. This kind of loopy, feminine script with the way the G's curled and the I's were dotted with little circles instead of dots. The first one I noticed said, "Thank you for the lovely stay. The room was perfect. Sarah Mitchell, Des Moines, Iowa." A few pages later, "Such a peaceful night's sleep. Jennifer Walsh, Austin, Texas." Then, "Exactly what I needed after a long day of driving. Rebecca Chun, Portland, Oregon." Now, maybe that doesn't sound weird to you, but here's the thing. It was the exact same handwriting. The same little flourishes, the same pressure, the same spacing. I should know. I'm a graphic designer. I notice fonts, typography, the way people write. This wasn't similar handwriting. This was the same person writing under different names. I kept flipping, and the entries kept coming. Different names, different cities, but always that same handwriting. And they were spread out over months, sometimes years. Amanda Rodriguez, Phoenix, Arizona. Lisa Thompson, Kansas City, Missouri. Michelle Davis, Little Rock, Arkansas. Always women's names. Always thanking the motel for something. Always that same loopy script. The clerk was still fiddling with the credit card machine, muttering something about the connection being slow. So I kept reading. The entries got stranger as I went deeper into book. The bed was so comfortable, I never wanted to leave. Tracy Wilson, Denver, Colorado. I felt so safe here, like nothing could hurt me. Kelly Martinez, Albuquerque, New Mexico. This place feels like home. I could stay forever. Nicole Johnson, Omaha, Nebraska. That last one made my skin crawl a little. Something about the phrasing felt off, like she didn't mean it in a good way. I was about to close the book when I got to the most recent entries, the last few pages, and that's when I saw it. The entry that made my blood run cold. It was the same handwriting, but this time the message was different. They won't let me leave. They keep changing my name, but I'm still here. If you're reading this, don't let them check you in. The name was scribbled out so heavily I couldn't read it. Just black ink scraped across the paper, like someone was desperate to erase their identity. "All set," the clerk said suddenly, and I jumped. I hadn't realized I'd been holding my breath. "Room 7, just down that way. You need help with your bags?" "No, I'm good." I managed, closing the guest book and grabbing my key. My hands were shaking a little, which was stupid. It was probably just some local with mental health issues who'd been sneaking into the office to write weird shit in the guest book. Or maybe it was the clerk's idea of a joke. Some places do that. Try to create a spooky atmosphere for travelers. But as I walked to my room, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. The parking lot was too quiet. No traffic sounds, no insects, nothing. Just my footsteps on the cracked asphalt and the buzz of that one fluorescent light over the office door. Room 7 was at the end of the row, next to the ice machine. The key stuck a little in the lock, and I had to jiggle it before the door finally opened with a click that sounded way too loud in the silence. The room was fine. I mean, it was exactly what you'd expect from a cheap roadside motel. Floral bedspread that had seen better days, wood grain paneling, a small TV bolted to the dresser, and that weird smell that all old motels have, like cleaning products trying to cover up decades of cigarette smoke and God knows what else. I threw my bag on the bed and plugged my phone into the wall. Thank God the outlets worked. While it was charging, I tried to shake off the weird feeling from the guest book. I mean, come on. I'm a 28-year-old guy from Chicago. I've lived in the city my whole adult life. I should be used to weird shit by now. I decided to take a shower and try to get some sleep. I had another 8 hours of driving ahead of me, and I wanted to get an early start. The bathroom was small and cramped, with one of those shower tub combos, and a mirror that had black spots around the edges where the silver backing was coming off. The water pressure was surprisingly good, though, and the water got hot fast. I started to relax a little. See? Just a normal motel room. Nothing to worry about. But as I was shampooing my hair, I heard something that made me freeze. A sound like scratching, like someone dragging their fingernails across wood. I turned off the water and listened. Nothing. Just the sound of water dripping from the shower head. I turned the water back on, and there it was again. Scratch, scratch, scratch. This time I jumped out of the shower, soap still in my hair, and pressed my ear to the bathroom door. The scratching was coming from the main room. Specifically, it sounded like it was coming from the door. I wrapped the towel around my waist and slowly opened the bathroom door. The main room was empty, exactly as I'd left it. But as I stood there, dripping wet and straining to hear, the sound came again. It wasn't scratching. It was someone trying the door handle. Very slowly, very quietly, like they were testing to see if it was locked. I crept over to the window and pulled back the curtain just a crack. The parking lot was empty, except for the same 3 vehicles I'd seen when I arrived. No one was standing by my door, but the handle was definitely moving. Just barely, but enough that I could see it in the dim light from a parking lot lamp. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure whoever was out there could hear it. I grabbed my phone. It was up to about 20% battery now, and thought about calling the police. But what would I say? Someone's trying my door handle at a motel? They'd probably think I was paranoid or high. Instead, I called the front desk. It rang about 6 times before the clerk picked up. Rest well in. How can I help you? Hi, this is a guest in room 7. Someone's trying to get into my room. There was a pause. A long pause. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Someone is outside my door, trying to handle. I think they might be trying to break in. Another pause. I could hear him breathing on the other end. Sir, I've been in the office this whole time, and I haven't seen anyone in the parking lot. Are you sure it wasn't just the wind? The wind doesn't turn door handles, I said. Well, no, I suppose it doesn't. Tell you what, I'll take a walk around, make sure everything's secure. You just sit tight. The line went dead. I waited by the window, watching for the clerk to come outside, but he never did. The office light stayed on, and I could see his shadow moving around inside, but he never opened the door, and the handle kept turning. Every few minutes. Just a little test, like someone checking to see if I was still awake. That's when I decided to look at the guest book entries again. I'd taken a picture of that last page with my phone, the one with the warning. I zoomed in on the scribbled out name, adjusting the brightness and contrast, and I could just make out a few letters underneath the black ink. My name is Finn. I stare at the phone screen for a full minute, my brain trying to process what I was seeing. It was impossible. I'd never been to this motel before. I'd never written in that guest book, but there was my name, scratched out in desperate black strokes, under a message that said, "They won't let me leave." I scrolled back through the photos I'd taken of the other entries. All those women's names in the same handwriting. Sarah Mitchell, Jennifer Walsh, Rebecca Chun, Amanda Rodriguez, Lisa Thompson, Michelle Davis, Tracy Wilson, Kelly Martinez, Nicole Johnson. What if they weren't different people? What if they were all the same person, just changing their name each time, or having their name changed for them? What if that person was still here? I called the front desk again. This time it only rang twice. Restwell Inn. It's room 7 again. I want to check out. Now. I'm afraid checkout isn't until 11 a.m., sir. I don't care. I want to leave right now. Well, that's going to be a problem. Something in his voice had changed. The folksy friendliness was gone. Now he sounded clinical, matter of fact. Why is that a problem? Because Finn, you haven't finished signing in yet. He knew my name. I'd pay with a credit card, sure, but he knew my name was Finn. And he said it like he'd been expecting me. What do you mean, signing in? The guest book, Finn. You looked at it, but you didn't sign it. That's the rule here at the Restwell Inn. Everyone signs a book. I hung up and immediately tried to call 911. No signal. My phone showed full bars when I called the front desk, but now, nothing. That's when I heard footsteps outside. Not just one person. Multiple sets of feet, walking slowly around the building. And voices. Quiet voices. Like people trying not to wake someone up. But I could hear what they were saying. He's still awake. He saw the book. Should we wait? No. He's been here too long already. I looked out the window again. There were people in the parking lot now. 6 or 7 of them. Standing in a loose circle around my room. They were all women. All dressed in different clothes from different eras. One in a 1980s style tracksuit. One in early 2000s low-rise jeans. One in a sundress that looked like it was from the 1990s. But their faces all had the same empty expression. Like they were sleepwalking. And they were all holding pens. The door handle turned again, but this time it didn't stop. I heard the click of the lock disengaging. Even though I was sure I'd locked it, the door swung open slowly and the clerk walked in. He was smiling that too wide smile again, and he was carrying the guest book. Time to sign in, Finn, he said. Don't worry, it doesn't hurt, and you'll like it here. Everyone does, eventually. I grabbed a lamp from a bedside table and swung it at the clerk's head. He went down, but he didn't stay down. Just got back up, still smiling, blood running down his forehead. Now that's not very polite, Finn. I ran, pushed past the women, who moved like they were underwater, and bolted for my car. My keys were in my pocket, thank God. I fumbled with the unlock button, hands shaking so bad I could barely press it. The engine turned over on the first try. I threw it in reverse and floored it, tires screaming on the asphalt. In the rear-view mirror, I could see them all standing there in the parking lot, watching me go. Not chasing, just watching. I drove for 3 hours straight without stopping. Didn't slow down until I saw the lights of Grand Island, Nebraska. Found a well-lit truck stop with lots of people around, and sat in my car, shaking, until the sun came up. I looked up the Restwell, and when I got home, couldn't find anything online. No reviews, no website, no business listings. It's like it doesn't exist. But I know it does. I have the pictures on my phone to prove it. Well, I had them. When I went to show my sister, all the photos were gone. Just deleted, like they'd never been there at all. But here's the thing that really fucks with me. 2 weeks after I got back, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a leather-bound guest book, the same one from the motel. And when I opened it, there was a new entry on the last page. Same handwriting as all the others. Same loopy script with the little circles over the eyes. Thanks for stopping by. Hope to see you again soon. Finn Morrison, Chicago, Illinois. I never wrote that. I know I never wrote that. But it's my handwriting. I'm looking at it right now, and it's definitely my handwriting. So that's my story. That's why I can't sleep. because every night around 2 a.m. I hear it. Someone try my apartment door handle. Very slowly, very quietly, like they're testing to see if it's locked. And sometimes, when I look out my window, I see them, standing under the streetlight across from my building. Sarah, Jennifer, Rebecca, and all the rest, just waiting. The guest book is still here on my kitchen table. I keep meaning to throw it away, but every time I try, I find myself opening it instead, looking at all those entries in my handwriting, all those names I never signed. Sometimes I catch myself picking up a pen, starting to write a new entry, and for just a second, I can't remember who I am, can't remember my real name, but then I snap out of it and put the pen down. Every time, so far. The thing is, I've been thinking about taking another road trip, just a short one, maybe down to see some friends in Kansas City. It's been a while since I've been on the open road, and I know the perfect place to stop for the night. After all, everyone has to sign the guest book eventually.